Oh, I didn't hear what you said. Driving in St. Cloud. Oh, you're in lead.
Yeah.
Wow. Now you don't. Now you live closer to where you work. Or down.
I have. Well, I don't do that. Let me put it that way. Yeah. But,
What's that? There's a slide on it? Oh, okay.
there were days. In that last year and ended on 94. My goal is not to die on
So one thing you could do is when we're transitioning, you could actually hold those two things and just stand more in the middle if you want to like not have to be as. And then that while you're doing that, then I can just.
Okay, let's do that then.
So these are both on. Just
Yeah.
sing a little song, do a little dance.
Little dance.
Get down tonight. Something like that.
Why are they together?
Because one is going to the speakers and one is going to the.
Yeah. I feel really important.
Two fisting.
Hello. Is this thing on? I've never been known to have to use a microphone.
Apparently in this room you do that. Somebody said. And I think we're moving about.
Right here. Okay, I think we're ready to start. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to come out to our program this afternoon and the bearing the weather and the roads and such. I'm Troy Stutz. I'm the president of the Upper Midwest chapter of AMFP. So thank you so much again for being here. A couple things. Thank you for our sponsor, Herman Miller, for sponsoring us here today and back there, and also just for being a really long sponsor of our organization. We really appreciate it very much. Speaking of that, sponsorships are always available. We're starting a new year, so if your companies are interested in helping us and supporting us, without you, we cannot put on events like this. We would really appreciate it. Also, if you're not a member of AMFP, now is the time. Where it's at $95 for a year. We put on anywhere from 5 to 6 programs a year, and we would love to have your participation. Also, upcoming board elections, be looking for your email. Those elections will be posted here, hopefully in the end of next week sometime, with board positions being up voting on and coming on for 2020. And one other thing is this program has been approved for AIA credit. Is the sign-up sheet back in the sign-in sheet? So if you are looking for credits, please sign that so we can submit that. With that, the changing face of healthcare workforce. So our first presenter, excuse me, I'm sorry, I neglected to tell you. So on your desk, there is a piece of paper and pen. So when the presentations are going on, please take notes. So what we're going to do is when we're going to go through with the 4 panelists and go through their presentations, we're going to take those questions, we're going to group them together, and then present those also to the panelists, and they have an opportunity to answer your questions. So please be taking those as they're going through. So our first presenter is Eric Lucken. Lucken, right? He is the Director of Workplace Strategies at RSP Architects. He's serving clients for small startups to Fortune 100 companies. He collaborates with design teams across RSP's 6 locations to align design solutions to organizational goals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eric.
Is this going?
Should be going.
So I practiced this. It didn't go well, so you got to be gentle with me. And I'm kind of focusing more broadly on the U.S. workforce, but it was interesting how relevant kind of the issues that the broader workforce is changing are kind of exacerbated in healthcare. There are 5 generations at work today. I think everybody knows this. This isn't actually all that unusual. We've had 5 generations at work before. What's unique about this moment is the percentage makeup of the workforce to see that parity between boomers, Gen X, and millennials. I'm betting, though, that this is not the first time that you've heard about generations at work. There's been a lot of focus the last 10 or so years on millennials. I have a Google alert set for the workforce, and every day my email is filled with millennial blog posts and articles. I think there's nothing wrong with that, but this myopic focus on millennials, I think, is taking away from something much more important and impactful that's happening with the workforce. This is the US age pyramid. This is a kind of a classic way of showing a population. Each horizontal bar represents 5 years of age from birth to age 85, spreads out to represent the percentage of the population. With each year, with mortality that goes from a lot of children, it tapers up to that top bar. Throughout history, whenever you've looked at a population, it's made a pyramid. This is what's happening to the US population, not workforce, today. Looking at 2020 and through projected to 2060, you see that that pyramid is becoming a pillar. What's happening is that people are living longer, they're staying healthier longer, and at the same time, people are having a lot fewer children. This change is big. This is something that we have to pay a lot more attention to. It's causing some really interesting things to happen. In 2034, for the first time in US history, adults over 65 will outnumber children. That's a really impactful thing when you think about the workforce, when you think about aging populations. And this is even, when you think about sorry, I'm getting flustered. So some of the impacts are, older workers are the fastest growing segment of the US workforce. You look at kind of all other age groups, there's increases, but looking from 2016 to 2026, you see a 50% increase in workers aged 65 to 74, and 92% increase for workers 74 plus. Again, extremely impactful. And this kind of growth that's happening means that by 2026, workers age 55 plus will go from being the smallest segment of the workforce historically to the largest. And this is even, what's interesting is when you look at healthcare, this is even more pronounced. And so you think about something like registered nurses. The average age for a US worker is about 42. For a registered nurse, the average age is 50. And so this kind of graying workforce is even more pronounced there. This is not an ominous thing. This is actually a really good thing because age diversity in terms of teams delivers better results. Something's gone wrong with the format on this. Age diverse teams deliver better innovation. People, a Randstad study released last year found that people by and large, absolutely 90% prefer to work on age diverse teams. It's also going to be critical to tap into, convince people to work past age 65 because we're facing a really significant talent shortage in the United States, about 8.2 million workers short through 2027. And that's even more pronounced in terms of the healthcare industry, especially with an aging population. And this is one of the things that I like to address when thinking about this changing workforce is that there's a lot of stereotypes and myths around generations. One of them is that older workers are somehow tech challenged. When you actually research this, as Gartner has done, as ETS, the GRE people have done, they found that older generations actually outperform millennials and Gen Z in terms of applied technology in the workplace. There's also this idea that millennials and Gen Z are somehow introducing this, the importance of meaning and purpose at work, that this is new with them. A great study released last year by Imperative and LinkedIn of 26,000 people found that prioritizing purpose over pay and titles actually increases with age. And for me, what I do, there's also kind of around workplace environments, there's a lot of stereotypes about generations. One is that somehow millennials don't care at all about private offices. They just want to roam free. This is a survey released last year. They found that the private office remains the preferred office type for all generations with little variation. And open plan actually is equally unpopular with them. And in terms of spatial conditions, this idea that older generations are really concerned about noise and privacy, again, what you see when you actually study this is that all people, regardless of age, regardless of generation, privacy, noise control, these are critical elements for them and have to be taken into account in terms of the workplace. So thinking about the workplace response to this, I think the most important is as we're facing 30, 40, 50, 60-year careers is that this is not the paradigm that we come and spend through our workday. We have to improve on this. This is, the cubicle farm remains kind of the prevailing workplace type in the United States, and that's got to change. I think one of the most important ways that we change this is to recognize the diversity in the work that's happening in the workplace and deliver diversity in terms of our space types. So going from this kind of recipe of workstation, private office, conference room, break room, and really understanding the full scope of experience, thinking about it as an ecosystem that's within the building, within the neighborhood, within the direct immediate space. That's how we're going to deliver a better experience in terms of work. We also are going to have to really get intentional about learning and growth. People are not going to be able to hire the skills they need from this diminishing talent pool, and so we're going to have to, in terms of upskilling, reskilling our workers, we're going to have to create and think about our workplaces as places of learning, where we can see each other, find places to collaborate, quiet spaces. We also, especially with a aging workforce, our well-being is going to increase in terms of importance. It's already important. Aging has physical impacts, and so lighting, acoustics, ergonomic wayfinding, places to relax and rejuvenate, all of these things become much more important in terms of this age-diverse workforce. And connection, providing spaces and opportunities for people to connect and be together. It's really, one thing I've learned in the years I've been doing this is that that's really what drives people in terms of meaning and purpose. That what brings them to work is the connection with people. And so making a natural way for people to do that, not forced, is going to be really important, especially in terms of encouraging interaction between generations. And lastly, I think that looking at our design process, we need to be much more inclusive in terms of including people, taking into account diversity. A lot of my workshops that I do with clients sometimes end up with all 20-somethings, and so being really intentional and getting that perspective of not just age, but all the diversities that are happening today. And my last slide, this is a quote from Winston Churchill that I would constantly go back to. We shape our buildings thereafter they shape us. Our environments are not passive participants in our workdays. They are actively shaping our behaviors. They are impacting our performance for good or for bad. And I think that we have to be really careful about making sure that these environments are impacting us for the good. Thank you.
So one thing I neglected to mention is the format that we're utilizing is called Pecha Kucha format. So that's 20 slides, 20 seconds a slide. So it keeps things moving very quickly. So you did really well. You responded really well. So it's a great format. It's a great format, and it seems like people really respond to that. We go through the information and get a lot of information very quickly. So well done. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Stephanie. Our next presenter is Mark Sonneborn, who is the Vice President of the Minnesota Hospital Association, Health Information and Analytics. Mark, it's all.
Ready? I'm ready. There we go. Okay. Hi, everyone. Mark Sonneborn. I'm a rule follower, so the first slide, which is after this, tells something about myself. And so you'll see the fun fact is that I am a speech judge for high school speech tournaments, so that's my fun thing. I've been doing this a long time. I've been here for 15 years and have worked with other hospital associations. My role is to collect data. Usually I talk about claims data, which is the bill. We collect a copy of the bill that goes from the hospital, from all the bills that come from all the hospitals. But what I'm talking about today is the workforce data that we collect. And so an introduction, these are 40 direct care patient jobs, so these are people that take care of you. It comes from hospitals, clinics, and other facility types, so it includes labs and all of that. And it is 116 of our 140 hospitals participated in 2019. The project takeaways, and this slide is going to be at the end. This is the youngest workforce we've ever had. So this is Minnesota data. Take it for what it is. Metro leads in the diverse workforce. We had the highest exit rate, meaning people who left their job ever reported, and especially that's true for low tenure workers, which are those that have worked with us for less than 5 years. There's a lot of charts in this, but I'm going to point out the circled ones here. 45% of the direct care workforce are RNs, and that the other circle is about 41% of our workers are not full-time. So we have a lot of people that are not full-time workers, and maybe that's a news to you, but that's what it is. Generation, millennials are 44% of our workforce here in Minnesota, 33% on the Gen X, and they passed a couple of years ago. And at the very bottom is that what we call the iGen with Gen Z, the 1.9%, they're starting to come on. We'll see that one coming on sooner. So we have the lowest age ever reported this year. You see the trend. It has been getting lower and lower and lower. Look at the scale of this, though. It's not a big scale. Only a couple years there. But we are down at 41.72. We are collecting certified nurse assistants, which are at the low end, the younger people that come in. Our average age by job type, on the left side of this chart are physicians. They tend to be older. On the right side are the CNAs. RNs tend to be distributed throughout, but the average age is 41.7 here in Minnesota. In terms of gender diversity, which it's going to flip over to in a second here, 35 of our 40 jobs are dominated by females. We have 83% females overall. There are 5 jobs, physicians and paramedics among them that report majority male. Primary care physicians, interestingly, are half and half. But most of our workforce is female. In terms of our trends for ethnic diversity, the top line there is metro, and you see a steady climb in the diversity of our workforce in the metro area and a basic flatness in the non-metro area. And the next slide will show that in the metro area, even though we have the highest diversity compared to non-metro, our patient population is even more diverse, and the population at large is even more diverse. So we're trying to get it so that our workforce matches our general population. In the non-metro, it's even worse. It's about half. It's 2-to-1 diversity out in the general population. Non-full-time workers, the dark blue ones here are the RNs. You see that a lot of them are not full-time. And even if you go down the list, there are many of the positions that we have a lot of part-time and casual workers. And you look at the trends on the next chart, which we'll flip in a second, you see that this has been changing over time to more and more part-time. It's now half and half on the nurses, which is the top graph, and overall is all direct care workers where the lines are coming together. So I think it's important for you to know that this isn't a full-time working anymore. We do have quite a bit. We also collect vacancy data. We have on both the high end, which would be the physicians, and the low end, which would be CNAs and medical assistants. Those tend to have a lot of open positions. We take this as a snapshot a year. It's about 5% vacancy rate for all of these. And you see the physicians are on the left side of the chart. In terms of new hires, CNAs, 31.9% were hired during the year. And so that's our biggest position. Medical assistants are always being hired as well. We have more new hires in the metro than we do in the non-metro, but overall it was 12.6. You'll see in the next chart that our new hires, 2/3 of them are under the age of 34 and 20% of them are non-white. and non-Hispanic, or non-white or Hispanic, I should say. That's been changing over time. That number, 20%, has been increasing over time. And you can see there's a pie chart of where, what kind of diversity we're getting. This is a chart that shows 13% exit rate. Those who turn over tend to be physicians, some of the LPNs, some of the CNAs turn over. The purple is our exits, the red are retirements. So the retirement is not as big here, but it's something that we always pay attention to. Low tenure workers are 54% of the exits. And you see this, this is the light blue is the low tenure. That's the highest it's ever been, and that whole chart is as high as it's ever been. So on the next chart, we show the distribution of low tenure workers by job type. They tend to be, first of all, 43% have been with us less than 5 years. So that's a big issue for us for retention strategies. And you'll see on the next chart that, again, our low tenure turnover rate has been the highest that it's ever been. That's the top chart. The lower chart shows by year what our turnover rate trend is. So basically, the first 2 years, it is 19.5%. It steps down. If you get to 5 years, it gets down to 9%. So it's really important if you want to retain your employees that you want to keep them focus on that low tenure population so they'll stay. So again, in summary, we have the youngest workforce we've ever reported. We've been doing this for 12 years. Metro leads in diversity, highest exit rate, which might be a sign of a good economy, that people feel that they can move to other jobs. But we did get a strong hire rate as well, and the highest turnover rate we ever had for low tenure workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure, you're a little concerned about the format, but most of your slides, you were a little ahead of schedule, so I'm impressed by that. So our next presenter is Lorraine Griffin-Johnson. She is a human resources executive who started a business called LGJ and Associates, specialized in strategic organizational change, cultural assessments, analysis, including full suite of human resources services, enabling business to relaunch or start up to win in the marketplace. All right, thank you.
Are you ready?
I didn't practice. So they said have fun, so we're going to have a little fun here. I'm delighted to be here, so thank you for the invite to be here. I'm a native Texan. Been in Minnesota about 27 years and worked in some major conglomerates that I will share with you. This slide tells you all of the businesses that I've worked in, and we're focusing our consulting practice in those business areas also. I look forward to starting this practice and revisiting some of the conglomerates that you see on the screen that I've worked in around the country and around the globe. They represent large and small companies throughout the U.S. as well as around the globe. I wanted to emphasize the fact that today, human resources consulting, coaching, organizational development, diversity and inclusion are really key to helping businesses win in the marketplace. And your businesses are no different, and the work that you do will be no different in the space that you create. I have worked on every continent except for one, and that's Australia. And I say that to you because it'll make sense later when we talk about all of the people who currently reside and that we serve in the U.S. today. I'll start with your first objective, just to talk a little bit about the individuals in the workplace. In 10 years, the traditionals will basically disappear from the workforce, not necessarily from our environment, but from the workforce. Boomers will be reduced significantly in the workforce. And you see that the workforce will be made up primarily of Gen X, millennials, and those born after 2020. I duplicate this slide because I want to say to you that the work value will change. The traditionals and boomers have been consistent, been loyal to employers, Gen Xers and millennials will not. They will change jobs constantly, they expect to be paid for that, and they want flexibility on a regular basis. Millennials, also, they will make up 76 in 10 years, they'll make up 76 million in the population. They will also have earning power at about 179 billion, and they will receive 20 texts daily. 80% of them will sleep with their phones, so you'll know how to reach your children and grandchildren. 27% of them will be self-employed, which will be great for the entrepreneurships. 56% of them believe that technology helps people use their time more efficiently. And 31% of them believe that they earn enough money to lead the kind of life that they want to live. And that's great for those of us who have children. On objective 2, what are the things that we're doing to adapt? One of the things that we're doing, we're assessing our environments. What is it that different generations, different cultures want? Secondly, we are looking at what difference does those assessments make? So diversity assessments provides the data. So we know we're spending the resources in the right places to address the issues that are in our workplaces. And there are issues related to diversity. One is looking at the language. In healthcare, we have patients from around the world, and our staffs don't look that way. So that global map there represents the many languages that are spoken in healthcare environments today. And whether you work in an environment that's diverse or not, if you work in healthcare, language is spoken because the people who come to the US are diverse and the languages that are spoken are diverse. We are also assessing physicians and trying to understand what culturally do they know about people who come to our cultures from around the world. We're doing that in a way that it's non-punitive also. How are we taking action? We're launching employee resource groups because they can provide advice. They are customers and they can provide advice to customers. We're also hiring interpreters for every interaction with a patient so that we can get the diagnosis right. We're also identifying resources so that the entire workforce can change and respond to 21st century needs. So what do we mean when we say employee resource groups? These are just a few. You can see that at the top we have veterans, the double nickel, which is those over 55. They have provided tremendous advice on the aging workforce. The LGBTQ, which have provided great cultural knowledge on how to service patients who are transcending in our workplace. And of course, that should be Amera Latin. I don't know how it got to Amera Data, but have provided increasing knowledge about cultures in South America and from around the world. Millennials who really, in one of the environments that I was in, wanted to have happy hour at work. And our CEO said we could buy the liquor and leave it in the refrigerator. Interesting story I'd love to talk to you about during the break. Single parent, another interesting, no one wanted to support that, and our CEO decided to support that group. Women's Lead, really helping women develop in leadership roles, and of course, African American, who really have provided the opportunity for us to develop leaders. All of these groups in our organization, we learned very quickly, leaders emerged in the organization because often people were chosen that were not on the succession plan, but they emerged as leaders of these groups and were quite visible, and we were able to provide leadership opportunities, and they quickly got the attention and visibility so that we could get them in development programs and identify new leaders within our organization. Why employee resource groups? They can help us provide a more inclusive work environment. 90% of Fortune 500 companies have them. All, if not most, are voluntary-led. They provide the customer perspective, which is incredibly important. Lastly, what are the challenges you're going to be looking at? Recruitment and retention of employees. The old cultures don't work. Understanding of global practices across generations. Well, I did want to say, relative to space, one of the things that I had put on my work plan for this year was to do a disability assessment. One of the things I've learned in healthcare particularly is that access is critically important. And I don't think that healthcare organizations have done the appropriate assessment of their facilities to determine that access for disabled individuals is full, and that their buildings are fully accessible. And that's everything from those who are blind to the hard of hearing to those that are physically disabled.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Remember, the yellow paper, the paper in front of you, green paper, and the pens are available to put down your questions. So get ready for that after our next presenter. Our next presenter is Emily Anderson. She's project manager on space planning and design for Park Nicollet. She has multiple years as an interior designer for a couple different groups. Emily?
Good afternoon. I'm Emily Anderson, and I've been with Park Nicollet Health Services working as a project manager in space planning and design for about 5 years. And prior to that, my expertise in interior design was spent in healthcare and multifamily housing. Okay. In my free time, I enjoy gardening, and this is an image of my raised garden beds this year. They look pretty good. All right. Park Nicollet Real Estate consists of Methodist Hospital in St. Louis Park. We've got approximately 42 clinics and specialty centers, as well as 8 office buildings. We are very proud of the quality of care offered, and as a result, we've won some really nice awards. All right. Park Nicollet employs almost 10,000 employees. The majority of the people we employ are millennials or Generation Xers, with Generation X having about 47 more employees. But we also have 317 employees under the age of 21, as well as 51 employees over the age of 73. All right, Methodist Hospital. Methodist Hospital has been undergoing a modernization for the past 5 years, and it all started with the 8th floor in 2013. We looked to see what we could do for our staff hospital-wide, and some of the ideas that came out of this were positive staff interaction, shortened travel distances. Let's skip on. All right, this is an example of our old patient rooms. You can see that there's 2 patients per room, a non-ADA compliant toilet, multiple challenges with infection prevention, privacy, safety, and we know that 46% of RNs will experience a work-related injury in comparison to 29% in other fields. And these are our new rooms. 1 patient per room, right-sized toilet with a private shower. We have overhead lifts, better staff and patient interaction with the charting at the bedside, and this has been a huge staff and patient satisfier. As part of the modernization project, we also wanted to standardize storage. Here's an example of our nurse servers. And this allows each patient room to be stocked alike, and it helps with staff training as well as our float pool staff that go to different units on a daily basis. All right, the next slide is of our 3850 St. Louis Park Urgent Care. In 2018, we had the opportunity to renovate the patient care spaces. And prior to the renovation, our space was very compartmentalized. You can see the nursing stations are in the front. We've got exam and treatment in the middle, and then the physicians sat at the back. The nurse stations lacked flexibility with the big built-in desks. Each nurse station had its own med station, which created a duplication of products, and the nurse and clinician interaction occurred in the corridor, essentially. Treatment rooms were unfriendly, and then in this case, the computer is actually behind the treatment table. And here's a plan of the new layout today. It's focused around the nursing core with a shared med room. Exam and treatment rooms are around the nurse stations for maximum visibility and reduced steps. Clinicians are closer to the nurse stations for a better knowledge share. And we actually went down 3 exam rooms, but the staff thought the benefits of it were more important for the teamwork. Nurse stations, you can see that we have the lower systems panels, higher panels for quieter work like dictation, and we were able to incorporate LED lights for brighter spaces and less headaches. These are our exam rooms. We were able to standardize the exam room sizes, provide similar equipment and storage in all the spaces, and the clinician writing surface is near the door entry. And this is actually a safety initiative. The thought is that if a staff member feels threatened by the patient, they are closest to the door to leave. And then moving on to our Stilts building, this is right across the creek from Methodist Hospital, and in 2015 we had an opportunity to renovate the Human Resources Department. Because it's a Human Resources Department, we knew we couldn't eliminate all the barriers and create an open office work environment, but we wanted everyone to experience some nice views, natural light, and create better collaboration spaces. So we piloted a project. And some of the goals that came out of this pilot were, how do we increase the transfer of knowledge? How do we eliminate departmental isolation? How do we encourage staff to use the entire HR department as an extension of its workspace? All right, and this is the floor plan. We were able to eliminate waste and redundancy to create team-based approach workstation layouts. We have offices sprinkled in, centralized storage. We were able to provide social hubs where the views to the exterior were best, and we were able to provide right-sized conference rooms. This is an image of a social hub with casual meeting furniture, and in the background you'll see the work cafe where nutrition is encouraged, and it's also an extension of the work environment. All right, conference rooms. We actually provided more but smaller conference rooms. This was a benefit for the Human Resources Department, and also technology played an important role. With Human Resources, we have a lot of interviews that are from out of state, and also just collaboration with colleagues from other sites. We also had a really nice sustainability story. We were tasked to reuse existing systems furniture product. And how can we do this to create a collaborative work environment? So what we did is around the window perimeter, we lowered some of the workstation panels to allow the light to bleed in. We also allowed employees choice and control of workstation meeting furniture. In the workplace satisfaction survey, 100% of the staff felt communication was facilitated better between employees, and 97% that they had a quiet space for confidential conversations. Previous to the project, these were both rated in the 30%. And at Park Nicollet, we try to do the right thing for our staff. Staff are the main reasons why we have a good reputation and we win so many awards. So in so many of our projects, we try to enhance the experience by including things like secured bike storage, lactation rooms, staff showers, and beautiful gardens as an extension of our work environment.
So we're just going to take a minute here, write down your questions, and then we'll come and gather them here in a second or so, in a few minutes. And Stephanie has the commercial. You have a commercial.
So again, Troy mentioned earlier that we really appreciate our sponsors. So we have a little slide here. the wrong host is up. It's supposed to be Herman Miller. That's my fault. I picked the wrong file. But Herman Miller is our sponsor today, but those are our other sponsors as well. And we want to welcome our new sponsor, Siemens. As of today, we have a new sponsor. So without you, you're what makes this organization happen, so we totally appreciate it.
Okay, I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to write down your questions, but I really want to hear from Lorraine about the alcohol in the refrigerator.
Yes. So I will entertain while they write their questions. So this was a financial services company that was headquartered in the UK, but our US operations was here in Minneapolis, and I was the chief HR officer, so it gave me great heartburn when the request was that we stock the refrigerator with adult beverages and that we have a happy hour after work in the break room. I immediately went to our lawyer and said, what can we do? I don't want to do this. I think that I'm worried about the rides home afterwards. I'm worried about control. Can we say you can have one beer or one glass of wine or whatever? And we did do the research, and if you don't know, there is a case that where an employee had drinks after work on the premises, and that we are not liable if an employee does leave work. That was, yeah, the employer won in a Minnesota court. So we did have happy hour. I had great heartburn, and I have some gray hairs that don't show today because of it. But our entire workforce was millennials, great group of people, but it was a bit progressive for me as HR leader in the organization.
Thank you for sharing. Do you have all the questions? You're organizing? So here's how this works. So we have multiple questions, and you're all free to answer that question, and you have 4 minutes as a panel to answer that question. Then after the 4 minutes, Scott's going to time us, is that the group here will decide whether we want to hear more about this or not, or move on. So we're going to start here. So what are the areas of greatest concern for Minnesota hospitals as they consider future workforce demands, needs, any facility implications? Who wants to start?
Well, since it's Minnesota hospitals. I would say, we look mostly at physician workforce and the nurse workforce. We actually think we might have enough nurses going forward, but the physician, there will be a crisis. We have an aging physician group, and also there's a rural, it's maldistributed. The rural workforce for physicians is really stressed. And so telemedicine might become one of the solutions for that. but it is, in terms of workforce, that's what we most worry about. In terms of facility, I think taking advantage of telemedicine and designing telemedicine environments is probably where I would say, but this is not my area of expertise.
In the space that I work in, it's the cultural knowledge of staff, period. We have global patients, and our workforce at every level here in Minnesota does not reflect that. It's growing, but it doesn't reflect it to the level that's needed to provide the care, and the data shows that.
I mean, this is more about the general kind of workforce, but one thing that we're finding with more mature workers is that there is, I think, like 74% of baby boomers intend to work past 65, but they don't intend to work in a full-time fashion. They want some kind of different work arrangement. And so I think as we're dealing with different, and it sounds like in terms of the industry, there's already a fair amount of part-time situations going on, but I think understanding that desire for flexibility, responding to it, I think there are absolutely facility implications about that as well.
At Park Nicollet, we already have the telemedicine capabilities. It's called Virtual. I'm sure you've all heard of it. But in addition to that, at our hospital specifically, we do have patient video monitoring. We have different technologies. One that comes to mind is called Vocera, that are already in place. And the goal is to monitor patients, keep staff and everyone safe. But I could see these taking on an expanded role if the nursing, or if staff shortages become a problem, where you're monitoring patients a little bit more virtually rather than in person.
Okay, with that, any more questions related to that? Do you want them to continue to talk about that? Do you have anything else to add? If not, go.
Cultural competency one is interesting to me in terms of what are the solutions that more than just I'm curious what Ryan about how our health system is dealing with that cultural competency.
So one of the things that we did was, and I didn't, it was on the slide, but I didn't go into details on it. We did a cultural competence and linguistic assessment with all 600, actually it was 750 providers and our nurse practitioners. All of them took the assessment. And that was quite an undertaking to convince them to take it. I did mention the non-punitive piece, which was critical. We took the developmental approach, and I actually spearheaded that this was not going to be something that you shared with someone else, but it had to be self-development. You got your score, you shared it with one other person, and then we actually identified the experts in those areas so that if someone had spent their residency in South Africa and they were very familiar with the diseases, so that we could start to develop practices of expertise within our own organization so we could teach physicians. When we assessed the records of the patients, we could see that patients from other parts of the world, and this is what identified some of the implicit biases, were not getting the same referrals for the same diseases as local patients were. So we really, when we started to identify that, and then we could take it back to the specific clinics and start to identify the physicians that needed that support. And we weren't going to penalize them for it, but start to identify where help was needed and identify the experts to start to help with that. That's a long process, but it was the beginning.
Anybody else?
I have a question on the fact that there was the growth and the breadth of part-time work, and trying to understand, I understand the need for the flexibility, people want that flexibility, but then
So, having been in HR all my life, 25 years ago we started with part-time jobs, or job sharing is what really, and in healthcare I really started to support, to specifically address your question around the care of the patient. And one of the practices that we started was that it had to be transparent. So if two people were caring for a patient, it was their responsibility to make sure that they handed off to one another and that it was transparent. If there were two assistants that were supporting an executive, it was their responsibility to make sure that it was a seamless, that job was seamless, so they handed off to one another. That was how we decided that it was successful, and we held them accountable for the work that needed to be done in those roles. So 25 years ago, it was in a corporate environment. 3 years ago, it was at CentraCare when we started to talk about it in terms of patient care.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question. This is the challenge for managers in particular, to make sure that the employees that they have some consistency, not only from one employee to the other, but from shift to shift. And in terms of sustainability, I think our data does include people that get pay differential for working unpopular shifts, so that they can, the amount of money they make is close to what a full-time would make, because there are like 16-hour work weeks where you're doing, 24, where you do two 12-hour shifts on the weekend, and that's almost like a full-time job. So that would be included in the part-time type of things. But more and more, because of some of the data you were putting up, that there are people that just don't have all that much time. I heard one of our members up north was having trouble staffing a long-term care, and they said, well, whatever hours you want to work. If you want to work 8 hours, you want to work 4 hours, whenever you have the time, you can come in and do janitorial types of things. But we're getting more and more solutions that, it's the gig economy. You work when you're available, and we're trying to take advantage of that, or try to make it work with with the work we need to have done.
I also think, in terms of, so there's that aspect of this in terms of part-time workers and gig workers. There's also, I think, the growing importance that there's real intentionality about making sure that their experience when they are on site is valuable, is rewarding, that they're making connections, that they're creating that social network that's going to help them in terms of delivering quality care. And that's true across the board in terms of the workplace environments we're delivering today. And so those amenities, they don't diminish because you have more part-time workers. They actually kind of increase in importance.
And it's the current workers. One of our famed heart surgeons, I mentioned that about the job sharing and dialing back. And he said, I'm getting close. I don't want to work 60 hours a week anymore, but I would like to work 20 hours a week. Well, if he doesn't work, we lose that intellectual property and knowledge, more importantly. So having him work 20 hours a week to continue to train and work with younger physicians is really a benefit of the organization.
Just one last comment here is that in rural areas, again, the physicians get caught having to do call in the emergency room, and that is a really a work-life balance ruiner. And so it gets harder to recruit physicians to rural areas because of call. And then what ends up happening is those rural facilities have to do what's called locum tenens, which is basically staffing with contracted physicians, which costs more. And it just, this is a real problem, how to solve. We're in a problem where we just, there is not a good solution right now.
So we have time for another question that was brought up, and this is kind of a global. We hear from healthcare organizations, you read about it, everything else, doing more with less, and continuing to try to make, provide services to their patients. So we've been talking about a changing workforce, changing patient experience, all those things. How do groups, or how are you guiding people to balance or prioritize what's, the patient experience, the work experience, and the costs associated with those things?
So there is more attention paid to patient experience because there is actually some dollars at risk in an incentive for increasing patient experience. There's also, you may have heard of the triple aim, well, there's also the quadruple aim, and the fourth piece is staff vitality. So in order to be able to reduce the cost, improve health, and improve your experience, you need to have staff vitality. So it all works together, and you got to bend the cost curve too. And so all of these things are tensions that we have to manage. And whether we're successful at that or not is a testament to how well our managers can manage.
I mean, I completely agree with that. And I think, and this isn't healthcare, but we see this a lot in terms of other industries that organizations are really starting to understand that the best way to deliver a great customer experience is to deliver a great employee experience. And when that's done, when people are engaged in their work, when they want to be there, when they feel connected, it just does lead to better results. But I think it's absolutely attention. It's multiple things, but that's certainly one aspect of it.
Lorraine or Emily, anything? Okay. We are at about 10 after 5 now. Just wanted to be aware of the time and make sure that we're respectful for everybody's time. Does anybody else have any other questions for our panel at all? Go ahead.
Going back to the ways that you're handling the part-time work, have you experimented at all with helping with the other challenge of childcare shortage?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, because that's a problem in rural.
Absolutely
and
true.
locally, and it's hard enough for full-time employment.
Yeah.
Part-time is nuts.
Right. So especially in rural, so the question, I don't know if they can hear it on the video. The question was about providing childcare for part-time and for full-time workers, for that matter, especially in rural areas. Yeah, we've identified that as, it's not just, it's for any kind of worker in a rural area, period, right? Not just healthcare. That there's a shortage of child care providers, which economically for rural communities to survive, you need to be able to attract workers. If you can't provide child care, can't have a population, right? Unless they're just going to get older. And our populations of rural areas are getting older and older. There have been some examples, not enough, of our hospitals turning some parts of their facilities into child care, not only for just their employees, but for the community, because they recognize that as an economic engine to keep the populace there. But it is not, that is the exception and not the rule. But you've identified another one of the challenges that we hear often.
And I think that just to make the problem worse, I think that very soon, I think we're going to start dealing at the other end of the age spectrum. We're going to start having to look at elder care. We've got an aging population. We've got a shrinking safety network in terms of social safety network. And so, and the studies have shown the emotional trauma and stress in terms of elderly care, it can be so impactful on a job. And so I think that's something that we as a society are going to have to start to add into the mix of what we want to figure out.
I'm there.
So I just want to share a couple of things that have happened in some environments that I've been in. One of the first time I was in healthcare many years ago, one of the things that the organization that I worked for did was to create a sick child wing for employees' children, so they could bring their children to work and they could be there, they could go and be with them, but they were also in the healthcare facility where they could get care, which would accelerate their healing also, and get the employee back to work, or the employee could be at work and know that their a child was taken care of. I haven't heard of that in recent years, but certainly it was very well received by our staff at that time. And then at CentraCare, when I was there, you saw the single parent group. And one of the major issues of the single parent group was childcare. All of the employee resource groups had executive sponsors, and they all had to volunteer for the group that they wanted to sponsor. And no one volunteered for the single parent group. So our CEO volunteered to be the sponsor for the single parent group. And he learned a lot, though, and the first question he asked me in private was, am I going to have to build a child care center? And I said to him, I'm not going to guarantee you're not going to get asked, but I think we need to start to think about solutions. And that could come in the form of flexible scheduling. Is this work that can be done at home? Can we advance pay when people have vacation? But challenge the employees to participate in the solution for solving some of these problems. And a lot of times I think as organizations, we feel that we have to always solve the problem, when I think it's critically important that we engage employees in solving the problems, because sometimes the solutions that we come up with aren't the answers. But as we engage employees and they participate, we get closer to, I think, creating the satisfaction that we're trying to get.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Anything else real quick? Okay, great. A round of applause again for our panel. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time. Just a few things upcoming in our next program. Our next is in January. It's January 21st, so we'll be down at Cross Anderson's office on behavioral health. We have a happy hour that everybody likes to have come to in February. That's February 18th. And then we have our April program. I believe it's April 9th. Check the website for those events that are coming up. And if anybody's interested in volunteering on one of our committees, we love to have people come and get different perspectives. So please feel free to come and help and volunteer. So with that, thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Where was my